Before we move on to business news now, here's Joke Rogers. Joke.
Thank you, Ijoma. We're starting in Edo State, where the government has flagged off its national tax identification number for effective tax administration in the state. Speaking shortly after his registration, the state governor Adams Oshiomhole urged residents to ensure that they obtain their tax identification number to avoid multiple taxes.
My hope and prayers that this effort will lead to more efficiency, will remove some of the bottlenecks in our tax administration. It will save the citizens the harassment, the burden, the unnecessary interrogation they go through when they relocate from one state to the other. And I hope that at the end of the day, all Nigerians, irrespective of their state of residence, will find this exercise helpful and worthwhile. And as government, I will assist us to have a clearer picture of those who are within the taxable bracket. And I do understand that whatever that thing, this data are supposed to be updated from year to year.
Edo State Governor Adams Oshiomhole. The Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Mr. Oscar Onyema, will tomorrow, Wednesday, January 15th, review the stock market performance in 2013 and share the management's outlook for this year. According to a press release from the exchange, Mr. Onyema will use the opportunity to talk about the various policies and programs expected to reposition the market for better performance. He will first meet CEOs of broker-dealer firms, then members of the press, before he ends his session with market analysts. Well, there's renewed interest from local investors in oil marketing stock Orlando, despite its performance drop from a peak price of 29 naira to 26 naira. Well, stockbrokers believe the company is in prime position to acquire ConocoPhillips' 1.6 billion naira Nigerian assets after raising 55 billion naira through a rights issue. They say Orlando remains an impressive option for investors, but the company needs urgently to address its corporate governance issues.
Obviously, Orlando has defied a lot of permutations. Some moments you get very good news about them, at some other points it's not quite good news. So basically what we've seen in Orlando very lately is the fact that they've been involved in the ConocoPhillips deal, and that's ought to be a very positive indicator. But do not also forget that in the marketplace there are short-term players and there are also long-term players. So for those who probably would not have experienced the kind of rise, in the stock for a very long time, when it touched 29 naira plus, people saw it as an opportunity to offload. If you finish selling, what else can you do? So people are beginning to make re-entries into the stock. Corporate governance issues for them remain germane, and of course you do know that the company as an entity was embroiled in issues around corruption and all that. So those are issues that they must deal frontally.
The IMF has revamped its methodology to determine which countries are required to go under the financial microscope on a regular basis and added 4 new ones to the list. These are Poland, Denmark, Finland, and Norway. This brings to 29 the total number of countries to undergo mandatory financial sector assessments. The assessments remain voluntary for the rest of the member countries, undertaken by the IMF at their request. In December last year, the IMF board reviewed the methodology that determines whether a country's financial sector is systematically important. Of the 4 new additions to the list, Finland and Poland had financial reviews in 2010 and 2013 respectively. Denmark's review will take place in 2014, and IMF experts plan to visit Norway in 2015. Conditions to be considered include stress tests and the quality of the country's financial market. Well, that's business news tonight. Ijoma returns in just a moment with the rest of the news at 10.
Now here's Olumide Macaulay. Olumide.
Thank you, Gemma. Welcome to Sports News. The Confederation of African Football, CAF, has announced that the matches played within the finals of the African Nations Championships will now be considered in the FIFA rankings. CAF said the FIFA rankings for the month of January will be released on Thursday, January the 16th, which will take into account matches played until January the 12th within the framework of the African Nations Championships. Moreover, the February rankings shall incorporate all other matches of the competition, which is held from January the 11th to February the 1st, 2014. This latest development means the performance of the Super Eagles Team B at the ongoing African Nations Championships in South Africa will have an impact on the profile of the country in subsequent FIFA rankings. Also in football, the league management company LMC and the 20 clubs in the Glow Premier League have abolished short-term contracts for players with effect from next season. Announcing the decisions of the league management company in Abuja, Aloy Chukwuemeka, who represented club owners, says no player shall be offered a contract of less than 3 years. Also, a player's enhanced salary scheme will come in effect with a monthly minimum wage of 150,000 naira in the 2013-2014 season, while an upward review to 200,000 naira is to be implemented from the 2014-2015 league season. The LMC announces the weekend of February the 21st to the 23rd as a kickoff date for the 2013-2014 season. And the battle of the team which will scale through to the next round in Group A of the ongoing African Nations Championships resumes tomorrow. The attention will, however, be in the game between Nigeria and Mozambique, as both sides are in search of their first point at the Cape Town Stadium. The Super Eagles are currently in third place on the table after kicking off their campaign with a 2-1 loss to West African rivals Mali. Mozambique, on the other hand, are currently at the bottom of the table, also with no points on board after giving away their lead to lose 3-1 to host South Africa on Saturday. And in tennis, home favorite Bernard Tomic pulled up in the very first game of the match in the Australian Open, clutching his groin and limping following an innocuous-looking serve. The 21-year-old attempted to carry on after receiving off-court treatment and continued to entertain the crowd with a number of thunderous winners from the back of the court despite limited movement. But in typical fashion, Rafael Nadal was relentless and put Tomic through the motions as he wrapped up the first set 6-4, but that was enough for the Australian, who obviously didn't want to risk serious injury and announced his retirement from the match in the Australian Open.
Really hit very crisply back down the line. Perfect balance.
And that's it on Sports News. It's back to you, Gemma, for the rest of the news.
Unveiling the new look of Guinness. Discover a colorful world of more.
Over now to the foreign scene, and a UN investigation into the conflict in the Central African Republic has found widespread sectarian killings of civilians and sexual violence. Here's Cynthia Are with details.
Well, it might be a holiday, but there's certainly nothing worth celebrating at the moment in the Central African Republic. The UN Human Rights Chief says the situation is extremely volatile. She warned massive violations could reoccur without further significant international intervention. More than 1,000 people have died in sectarian violence, which erupted when Seleka rebels seized power in March last year, and Michel Djotodia became the country's first Muslim leader. Also today, the violence in South Sudan, as we all know by now, is still on the rise. Unfortunately, an army spokesperson has confirmed that while trying to flee to save their lives, more than 200 civilians died in the process. It happened when a Nile ferry accident occurred in the town of Malakal. The spokesperson also said the women and children were among the victims in Sunday's disaster. Then Egyptians came out to vote in a referendum on a new constitution, which could go a very long way in paving the way for fresh elections. The new charter aims to replace the constitution passed under Islamist President Mohamed Morsi months before he was ousted by the army. Finally, It's rather unfortunate, but the protests in Thailand haven't become a thing of the past. Today, protesters marched on several government buildings on the second day of what they're calling a shutdown of the capital, Bangkok. The protesters want the government of Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra to be replaced by an unelected People's Council. And that's it from me. Those are the top stories on the foreign scene.
Thanks a lot, Cynthia. And the main news again. It's now 2 hours into the National Caucus meeting of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, being held behind closed doors. But as we told you, the meeting is looking at how to chart a new course for the PDP leadership. And let's just look at those in attendance. That's the roll call. We have the President, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan, the Vice President, Namadi Sambo, the Senate President, David Mark, and his deputy. Also present are the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Aminu Tambuwal, and his deputy. Of course, the Chairman of the BOT, Tony Aneni, and the man in the eye of the storm, Bamanga Chukuru. Others include the governors of Akwa Ibom, Godswill Akpabio, and Benue, Gabriel Suswam, amongst others. Indeed, this meeting is one that Nigerians hope will produce a result. And just in the last couple of moments, we've also gathered that the Board of Trustees meeting of the People's Democratic Party has been called for tomorrow at the same venue. That's the Presidential Villa. So we'll be keeping an eye on both meetings and indeed keep you up to date with that information as it comes to us here on Channels Television. Well, that's the news at 10 tonight. Many thanks for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Renata. We try to enjoy the rest of your holiday. Good night.